Hello and welcome to Hopeful Moments 1. Today, we're going to share a story about the unreasonable expectations of a mother towards her children, especially her belief that she has every right to live off her children without lifting a finger. It reflects the greed, selfishness, and irresponsibility of this mother, as well as the straightforwardness and decisiveness of the child in protecting their family from negative influences. Today's story will take you through a situation full of surprises. The wake-up call for this mother, who thought she was about to enjoy a carefree life, only to be bluntly rejected in front of everyone, is the biggest shock of all. The reactions in the room, from mocking to sympathy, only serve to highlight her embarrassment and failure. If you find this story intriguing and filled with meaningful lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to learn more valuable insights. This conversation happened right during my grandmother's funeral, a moment that should have been solemn and filled with emotion. However, in the midst of the quiet atmosphere, where everyone was mourning and remembering the deceased, she acted in a completely different manner. Holding a plate of food, she casually sat down next to my aunt and me on the couch, without any hesitation or sadness. Her face gleamed with self-satisfaction, as though she were enjoying a feast rather than attending a funeral. Her lips constantly curled into a half-smile, not out of sorrow or thoughts of the departed, but as though she were secretly mocking the people around her. The way she looked at everyone, with an air of arrogance, made it seem like she considered herself superior to everyone else, making the atmosphere oddly uncomfortable. Instead of joining in the family's grief, she seemed to be enjoying an invisible power game, seeing herself as the winner, even though no one understood what she was truly thinking. It turned out that in her mind, she had imagined a completely different reality, a reality where she would easily move to another country to live with me, my partner, and our children, as though it was a given, as if we had a responsibility to provide for her. Why was she so confident? Because my grandmother had passed away, meaning she no longer had any responsibilities. No one to take care of, no obligations to fulfill, and most importantly, she had retired. In her mind, this was the perfect time to enjoy life, but not through her own hard work or money, but by relying on her children for support. With this strange belief, she went around boasting, proudly declaring that she would soon be living a luxurious retired life in a wealthy Scandinavian country. Not just comfortably, but in her words, it would be a free life, a dream scenario where she wouldn't have to lift a finger to do anything, without worrying about any responsibilities, just enjoying herself and exploiting others' resources. She spoke about it not as a plan, but as an inevitable reality, a privilege that she undoubtedly deserved. She never considered whether I or my partner would agree to this. She didn't care about anyone's feelings. To her, this wasn't a request or a desire, it was a decision she had made and imposed on us, as if the world operated according to her wishes and no one had the right to oppose her. In the solemn atmosphere of the funeral, as everyone was still lost in their thoughts about the departed, she suddenly raised her voice, breaking the silence around us. Her tone wasn't hesitant or shy, it was filled with confidence and arrogance, as though she were stating the obvious. "So when does my flight leave?" The sudden and absurd question made me freeze for a moment. I furrowed my brows, trying to understand what she was talking about. I asked again, trying to confirm if I had misheard. But instead of a private explanation, she raised her voice even further, speaking loud enough for the whole room to hear, as though announcing an obvious truth to everyone. "You know, our flight back to your husband's country, so I can live luxuriously like you promised me?" The audacity in her words left me stunned for a moment. Not only was it an out-of-the-blue question, but she also emphasized the so-called promise, something I had never said, never even thought about. Her words weren't uttered with any embarrassment or hope of approval, but with firm certainty, as if she were simply confirming a plan that was already set in motion. What bothered me even more was that she didn't speak loudly because she wanted to ask for my opinion, but to make sure the whole room heard, as if applying pressure and putting me in a corner. In her mind, me taking her to a wealthy country to live a luxurious life was a given, and now she just needed to confirm the timing. Such boldness was almost unbelievable. I had never promised her anything, not to mention providing for a luxurious life that she had invented in her head. The only thing I had promised myself was that I would cut contact with her as soon as I returned to my life, distancing myself from all the trouble she brought. So, true to my straightforward nature, and perhaps because I simply didn't have the patience to sugarcoat anything, I looked her straight in the eye and immediately shattered her delusional dream. I didn't beat around the bush, I didn't leave her with any hope. I simply told her the truth, clearly and decisively. It would never happen. I wasn't stupid enough to bring her dangerous energy into my life, and more importantly, I would never allow her near my children. What I had witnessed, what I had endured with her, was more than enough for me to understand that she was a toxic force that I never wanted my kids to be exposed to. To me, there was nothing more terrifying than letting a greedy, selfish, and irresponsible person like her influence my children. That statement was like a knife severing her illusions completely, and I felt no regret in uttering every single word. It must be said, it was the most shocking expression of the century, a rare moment when her face completely froze, every trace of smugness and arrogance vanishing without a trace. Her eyes widened, her mouth slightly agape as if her brain was struggling to process what she had just heard. She must have been utterly convinced that I would obediently accept the role of the dutiful child, nodding along and conforming to the grand vision she had crafted in her mind. But reality was the exact opposite. And the funniest part? The entire room witnessed that moment. My aunt, who was probably all too familiar with her brazenness, was the first to burst into laughter, a hearty, unrestrained laugh as if she had been waiting for this moment for ages. That laughter spread through the room, making it impossible for others to hold back their own chuckles. Her humiliation was no longer just a private matter between her and me, it had become a public spectacle for everyone to see. But whether out of sheer shock or an inability to accept the truth, she refused to believe her own ears. Her eyes were filled with confusion, her voice faltering as she asked again, as if hoping she had simply misheard. I had no problem repeating myself, this time, even more clearly, even more slowly, ensuring that she absorbed every single word. My voice carried no hesitation, no uncertainty, as if this decision had been made long ago and nothing could possibly change it. I looked her straight in the eye, unwavering and resolute, as I articulated each word with absolute clarity. You will not be moving in with me, and you should rid yourself of that idea immediately, because you are dangerous, lazy, greedy, and I will never allow that kind of energy anywhere near my children. What I said was not merely a rejection, it was a firm declaration, a boundary drawn with absolute clarity to protect my family. Those words were a wake-up call she could not ignore, signaling the end of any hope or unreasonable expectations she had clung to. I refused to let her greed, laziness, and toxicity have any influence over my children. I would not allow a single ounce of negativity to infiltrate their space. It was a decision made with unwavering resolve, not just for my own protection, but as the ultimate safeguard for the children I love. Those words did not merely mark a verbal refusal, they were a proclamation of my right to freedom and my family's right to safety. Upon hearing my firm rejection, she could not handle the truth and immediately erupted in rage. Her fury was not just anger at being refused, it was an explosion of entitlement, of a delusional belief that she had a right to something she was never owed. She began shouting, her voice not only loud but dripping with disdain, as if she had forgotten that no one was obligated to support and care for her unconditionally. As she raged about her supposed right to move in with me and my family, I could hear the challenge in her words, the assumption that she was entitled to a life of luxury at her children's expense without ever lifting a finger. Being someone who does not tolerate nonsense, I immediately responded with unwavering bluntness. I did not sugarcoat my words, nor did I try to soften the blow for her sake. Instead, I laid out a demand so clear and irrefutable that she could not possibly twist it, unless you're willing to find a place of your own, get a job, learn a new language, and actually start working again, you won't survive. My words were not just a statement of reality, they were a firm stance, making it crystal clear that I had no intention of allowing her to leech off my family, nor would I let her irresponsibility disrupt my life and my children's well-being. I emphasized that at this moment, my priority was my children. I could not, and would not, waste my precious time and energy on someone as lazy and selfish as her. These were not just words of rejection, they were a direct warning, a testament to my determination to shield my family from the toxicity she carried. To me, my family comes first, and I would not allow any irrational demands to interfere with that. After I firmly shut down her absurd request, she fell into silence, stunned into speechlessness, as if unable to process what she had just heard. From someone who was always outspoken, always trying to manipulate others, she suddenly had nothing left to say. No arguments. No justifications. Just silence. And that did not surprise me in the slightest. Nor did it make me feel uncomfortable or guilty. It was fine. Completely fine. I had no desire to convince her or to make her see reason. My decision was final, and I no longer expected anything from someone who refused to change or acknowledge the consequences of their actions. It felt like a release, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I no longer had to endure these absurd confrontations. And in that silence, her presence began to fade into irrelevance. Even so, the entire room had witnessed her humiliating downfall, and I could not miss the amused glances exchanged between those around us. The laughter was unspoken, but it echoed through the air, a natural reaction to the sheer absurdity of the fantasy she had built for herself. I could see the disdain in their eyes, the barely concealed amusement at the ridiculousness of it all. They were not directly involved, but her delusion was so over the top that they could not help but laugh. It was almost unbelievable that someone could assume things would go entirely their way, completely disregarding reality and the rights of others. I never expected this incident to cause such a stir. Initially, I thought it would just be a brief conversation, a moment of resistance on my part. But as everything unraveled, I realized its impact stretched far beyond just me and her. Everyone in that room had been drawn into the confrontation, and many of them were visibly taken aback by my unwavering clarity. It made me realize that sometimes, a single act of firm resolve can shift the entire dynamic of a situation. People were so accustomed to avoiding conflict, to keeping the peace, but my refusal to back down shattered that silence. It turned the whole thing into an undeniable, almost theatrical moment, one that left the air charged with both laughter and unspoken understanding. The timing of it all could not have been worse. But perhaps it was also inevitable. Tomorrow, I would be leaving. And in that moment, there was nothing more important to me than preparing for my departure. Facing her in this situation only made everything more tense, more uncomfortable. But I had no intention of staying. And that was a decision I could not, change. Absolutely not. I cannot accept the idea of continuing to live with or taking responsibility for someone who has long lost the ability to distinguish between entitlement and responsibility. As I prepared for a new chapter in my life, ready to leave this place, she chose this exact moment to make an unreasonable demand, not just to move in with me, but to intrude upon the freedom and safety of my family. And with my departure scheduled for the very next day, she knew this was her only chance to voice her desires. It felt like an attempt to pressure me into accepting unreasonable demands right before I could walk away. With my upcoming journey ahead, I had no intention of wasting another moment of my life dealing with her manipulative games and ridiculous requests. I had no time to linger and explain things that had long been clear in my mind. She had to face reality at that very moment, because if not, I would not have another opportunity to make my stance clear before I left. This was not just about my need for freedom but about ensuring she no longer encroached on my personal space. That moment was far from pleasant. Not only did I have to confront an unwanted conflict, but I also had to mentally prepare for the closing of a chapter in my life, with all the tension and emotions that came with it. But I knew that if I did not make things clear right then and there, she would continue clinging to her delusions, and I would not be able to leave in peace. So, I did not hesitate to face her, even though I knew it would be an incredibly uncomfortable confrontation, one that was completely unavoidable. Was I already angry at her before she did this? The answer is undoubtedly yes. But perhaps my anger did not stem solely from her actions that day, it also came from her insensitivity and thoughtlessness in a moment of grief and pain. My anger was not baseless, it was a natural response to what she had done. Her mother had just passed away. The entire family was mourning, My grandmother had also just passed, and yet, she chose this exact time to make such absurd and even disrespectful demands. While the family was still drowning in sorrow, she seemed unfazed, eagerly talking about her future plans as if the grief surrounding her did not exist. The fact that she could so cheerfully and carelessly discuss moving away, leaving everything behind without a single thought for those grieving, made me feel deeply insulted. My anger only intensified when I realized how utterly insensitive she was. Yes, she had the right to make decisions about her own life, but the way she went about it completely disregarded the grief and loss our family was experiencing. While we were all struggling to cope with our loss, she treated it as an opportunity to escape from everything. She spoke of a lavish life she wanted, of living off others to indulge in material pleasures, without a single regard for the situation at hand. Of course, she loves luxury goods, I thought. And that only made her request even more absurd. It was not just that she wanted an easy life, it was that she wanted to live a life of pure indulgence without lifting a finger. The selfishness in her words was unbearable. My anger was not just about what she said but also about her complete lack of awareness of how her actions affected others. While the rest of us were consumed by grief, she was preoccupied with herself, her own desires, her own future, without a single thought for the pain everyone else was enduring. That, to me, was simply unforgivable. Not because I lacked compassion, but because I could not stand by and watch someone so carelessly hurt our family without a second thought. Why was she dangerous? To truly understand the danger she posed, we must examine her character and the choices she had made throughout her life. She was not a person who valued family bonds or understood the balance between personal gain and familial responsibility. She was someone willing to sacrifice anything, even her own relationships, if it meant securing a life of wealth and comfort. What she valued most, and what made her truly dangerous, was money. If given the chance to live the life she desired, a luxurious existence without having to work or sacrifice anything, she would take it without hesitation, regardless of the cost. She would choose money over family every time if it meant she could live exactly as she pleased. This was not just greed, it was a fundamental disregard for the safety and happiness of her loved ones. To her, family was nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. And if that tool no longer served her purpose, she would not hesitate to discard it or even harm those closest to her. This was not just selfishness, it was a dangerous mindset toward relationships. She did not value connection, love, or sacrifice. To her, everything could be bought. And anything, whether it be affection, protection, or trust, was something she was willing to trade for material gain. With such thoughts and actions, she becomes an extremely dangerous person, especially when her decisions can affect those who are more vulnerable around her, particularly children. I do not want that near my children. This statement is not just a reflection of a mother's protective instinct but also a firm stance on safeguarding the values I prioritize in raising my children. I cannot allow someone like her, whose life philosophy revolves solely around personal gain and material wealth, to infiltrate my family's life, where I strive to nurture children with values of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. She is not merely a behavioral threat but also a carrier of distorted values. My children need to grow up in a healthy environment where good values are prioritized and where family is a place of love and mutual support, not a place for exploitation and personal gain. Therefore, I cannot let her become a part of their lives, knowing that she has the potential to upend everything I am trying to build for them. This statement carries immense emotional weight and reveals a heartbreaking story of her lack of care and responsibility for the suffering I endured as a child. I don't want to talk about this. This sentence signals a profound sadness, a long-buried emotional suppression, because bringing it up would not only reopen old wounds but also force me to confront a reality I would rather not face. However, sometimes silence cannot last forever, and sometimes, speaking the truth is necessary, no matter how painful it is. She, the one I once expected to protect and care for me, was the very person who abandoned me in my most vulnerable moments. She enabled the suffering I had to endure as a child. The things I refer to here are not ordinary life events but deep wounds and prolonged traumas I experienced for a long time, things that a child like me could not protect myself from, yet received no shelter from the one I should have been able to rely on. Worse, she either facilitated those things or remained indifferent, allowing them to happen without intervention or protection. What I had to face was not just physical pain but also psychological wounds, a profound betrayal in which she played a major role. And many other things. This phrase hints at countless untold stories, dark and painful experiences I had to endure alone, with no one there to help me. The many other things are not just minor details but rather excruciating experiences, memories of a childhood devoid of love and care, memories I had to live with for far too long. As long as she had money, she did not care about what was happening. This is the key point, the clearest view of her true nature. To her, money was not just the most important thing in life, it was the only thing she paid attention to, disregarding everything else, including family, love, and her responsibilities to those closest to her. When money becomes the center of all decisions and actions, she is willing to turn a blind eye to issues far more important, the fundamental human values that should exist within a family. This does not just make her irresponsible, it makes me feel as if I held no value in her eyes. To her, the truly meaningful things in life, family bonds, love, protection, were all conditional. As long as she had money, everything else could be ignored. And because of this, I cannot help but feel profound injustice and fury. I am not just hurt by what she did in the past, I feel betrayed by my own relative, someone who should have been my strongest support. This reality only highlights the cruelty and selfishness behind her actions, and I cannot allow them to continue affecting my life and my loved ones, especially my children. Ultimately, this story is not just a condemnation of an individual but also a profound lesson about the importance of responsibility, love, and protection within a family. Loved ones should not be used as tools to serve personal interests. A true family is built on connection, unconditional love, and mutual sacrifice. When someone prioritizes personal gain above all else, disregarding the emotions and safety of those around them, they become a danger to those relationships. The greatest lesson I have learned from this experience is this: we must know how to protect ourselves, especially those we love. Likewise, we must not allow toxic relationships to persist, because only when we respect and care for ourselves can we bring true value to our family and loved ones. The advice I want to share is this: always place love and respect at the center of every relationship. Whether it is in family, work, or any other aspect of life, never sacrifice yourself just to please someone else. If someone does not respect you or provide you with emotional safety, do not hesitate to walk away. We all have the right to live in a healthy environment, where love, respect, and care for one another are the top priorities. Be brave enough to protect yourself and those you cherish, because only when you understand your own worth can you bring peace and happiness to those around you.